Hey, so this is going to be, oh, sorry, Picard here. This is going to be a very different video than anything I've posted on my channel, I think. At least recently anyway, because I've done like reviews and stuff, and I've done, my streams and everything, and gameplays and stuff. But this is just going to be kind of a more rambly, just me. It's actually going to be a video response to I forgot what the video is called. I think it's like my most hated part of the webcomicing process, but it's by a user on YouTube named CaezHel. So it's CaezHel slash Chris. Their name is Chris, and I'm gonna put their information in the description because they also have a wonderful webcomic called Lucky that you guys should check out. Again, everything is gonna be in the description, but they have been an incredible source of inspiration for me in the past year or so, and I'll talk more about that later as we get farther into this video. Hopefully it won't be like too long, but yeah, they've been a huge source of inspiration, and recently they put out a video talking about how thumbnails are just the pits for them as far as like a thumbnailing process. And they asked, put out a call for different podcasts and stuff, which I'm sorry, I don't have any spooky horror season podcasts to recommend, but they also asked for what's the worst part of your process, or the most difficult part of your process when you do webcomics, if you're a webcomic creator, and what is your thumbnailing process, or do you have any tips for thumbnails? And they also said if you are a webcomic creator and you do YouTube, feel free to make a video response to this, which is what I'm doing, because I had to really sit and think about sorry, I'm also picking my nails at the same time. I had to really sit and think about just a lot of this stuff, and I didn't want to just give a random or just a cut and dry YouTube response, because I really can't undersell how much this person's videos in particular, not just them, but their videos have inspired me and helped me out a lot in the past year or so. So I wanted to return the favor with a video of my own. So yeah, when it comes to the format of this video, I think I'm just gonna do a list. It's not gonna be super organized or anything. I'm just gonna do a list of, I think it's 8 I have on here. I'm looking at my notes now. Yeah, okay. I have just a list of 8, which is kind of unorthodox, but whatever, of just tips that, my phone's going off, of just tips that are not even really tips, they're just kind of things that I keep in mind, and just kind of walking you guys through my thumbnailing process. I had to kind of go through, because I was originally going to go through a retrospective of Leftovers, because the way Leftovers has been thumbnailed through the years is different every time. So it was a bunch of different formats, but I was re-listening to Caez's video, and I think they're talking less about the physical format of thumbnailing and more about the mentality that goes into thumbnailing. So I reorganized everything. Also, for those of you who are new here or might be coming here from, because I am going to post this and tag Caez in it, so those of you who might be new here, I have a webcomic. First of all, hi, my name is Picard, or Deja. I have a webcomic named Leftovers, which is a Pokemon fan comic based in Hoenn, and it's basically about my main character Asadi, and she's trying to balance Pokemon training with, she's 19, so she's trying to balance Pokemon training with the impeding responsibilities of an adult, and it's about seeing the world through her eyes and just seeing Hoenn and stuff through her eyes as she's maturing, as she's growing up, and we get to see more of the world and everything that goes down, and her coming to all these realizations and stuff. And it's really inspired a lot by just my own period of growth, because Asadi is based off of me when I was 19. And 19 is also when I started Leftovers. It was 6 years ago, gonna have years ago is when I started Leftovers. So Asadi is based off of me back then, which is like hilarious because I'm not nearly as shy as she was, but it's interesting to like look at it through a lens of like where I was versus where I am now. But yeah, if you want to check it out, I'll also have links to that in the description. I definitely, obviously because it's my baby, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's, if you are familiar with Pokemon comics, you might be familiar with a format called Nuzlocke, where a person will play a game and they have like certain rules, but one of the main rules is like you can only or two of the main rules is like you can only catch one Pokemon per route, and you can only or once a Pokemon faints it's dead, etc, etc. There's different types of rules, but people, when they do that, they also tend to make comics based off of that, and this is not that. Leftovers is not a Nuzlocke. It's just a story that I'm writing in the Pokemon world and getting to explore and use that world, you know, to my benefit and everything. So, yeah, if you want to check it out, I would be eternally grateful. So, let's get into this list. I think I didn't actually write notes on this particular part, but when it comes to the most difficult part of working on Leftovers for me, I would definitely kind of put that tie between thumbnails and coming up with the actual story, because I know like CaezHel is in a different situation where they said that they have written the story out and now it's just a matter of like translating it. For me, I keep running into this roadblock where I'll write, you know, a little bit of the story and then something in life will happen. Like just recently, something in life happened that shook up my entire understanding of just like my interactions with people. And then it's like, oh man, now I have to go back and rewrite certain parts of the story because obviously this is like, you know, growing with me. It's showing a side of maturing and everything. And I want to be able to incorporate those life lessons and stuff that I learned. So I end up not being able to write too far ahead, or maybe I should say there is the anxiety of not writing too far ahead because I never know what's going to come up. And contending with that is, you know, it's a bit of a beast because obviously nobody knows what's going to happen in life, but that's honestly just anxiety as a whole, where it's like you just fear the unknown. And there's lots and lots of unknowns in life. I've gotten a little bit better about it since last year, and I'll, you know, talk more about last year as I get into my tips, but I've gotten a little bit better about, you know, being able to write ahead because I just kind of figure that the whatever comes up, I can just incorporate it as, like, I've gotten better at going with the flow, basically. And whatever comes up, I can incorporate it, you know, later or in a different arc or et cetera, et cetera. But I have the bare bones skeleton of where I want Leftovers to go all the way up to the end of the story. It's a long one. It's so long. But yeah, so I would say like sitting down and actually writing out the details though. Like actually scripting, I would say is probably, if not the most difficult, definitely the most time consuming, tied with thumbnails, because it is such a like thought heavy process. It's I like to think of myself as a computer, and during the you know how sometimes, or your computers or game consoles or electronics in general will, like you'll hear the fan running because they're processing everything. They're trying to process stuff and overheating. I like to think of myself as a computer, and whenever I have to work on scripting or thumbnails, specifically thumbnails, I tend to be in here like overclocking my system because I'm just like, oh, there's so many things you have to consider, as you'll see from my list, you know, from the things that I consider. There's so much that you have to put into making thumbnails, and you know, that definitely varies based on the person. But again, I keep saying as you'll see without actually getting into anything, but again, like as you'll see, I've kind of condensed a lot of my process down the line. But yeah, most difficult part I would definitely say is a tie between like scripting and thumbnailing, just because it's like you have to, that is where you start putting things together. Like, it's one thing to have a general skeleton of your story, it's another thing entirely to get it down to the nitty-gritty of like how things work together. For me in particular, when I script, I have so many different characters and all of them have different voices. So that can be, like if you're talking about, having me as a computer and you pull up you pull up your task manager, right? You got all these different little processes running. Different characters' voices, that's a process. When I script, I think about the visuals. That's another thing too I forgot to mention. So because of my anxiety, I tend to think about leftovers a lot more than I actually get to work on it. So by the time, somebody just came in and the door scared the shit out of me. I'm not gonna lie. But by the time I actually end up writing the script or working on the thumbnails, I already know what's going on. So now at this point, I've gone from not being able to sit and work on leftovers to I have to get this out immediately, because sometimes it feels like my motivation's on has an expiration date. So it's very touch and go when it comes to like the pacing of this whole process. It definitely has varied over the years. But yeah, so back to the task manager computer thing, there's, different characters' voices, that's a process. Me trying to be patient and, I'll get to the scenes when I get to the scenes, that's a process. But then also, because I know, I've thought about it so much and I know what's going to happen visually, having to describe that, and then the patience of having to like write out a paragraph and describe that versus just like putting down all the scripts and stuff. I do that because I actually would say that I have I'm trying to think, do I want to go into that now or later? I think I might go into that later. But yeah, so you have like a bunch of different processes and stuff with computer processes when it comes to thumbnailing or scripting or anything. But yeah, when it comes to the actual tips for for thumbnailing, or like how I think when I thumbnail, now is when I can finally get into this list. So here we go. We're like 12 minutes into this. Alright, so number one, I don't even know how I'm gonna because I wrote all of these with like cute little titles. So maybe I'll just say like number one and then boom, title. So yeah, number one. So not a lot of people know this because I don't really like put it out there a whole lot. But Leftovers was initially based off of Steven Universe. Not like based off the world of Steven Universe, but the format wise. So my earlier chapters are like 13 to 15 pages long. And I thought of each chapter as like an 11-minute episode of a show. So in doing that, I ended up thinking about my comic not as individual drawn frames, but as like animation cuts. So whenever you go from one frame to another, it's like either you're panning or you're cutting or you're zooming in or out, etc., etc. But I think about my panels as actual cuts of film or animation, and that comes a lot from just like the comparison, or that comes a lot from like looking at a lot of animation and looking at specifically with Steven Universe and how their shots were done in the beginning seasons. But then also just the comparison, I feel like Steven Universe is kind of incidental there, but the comparison of having Leftovers be an animation versus a comic is just because it's like I'm not gonna be able to sit and animate Leftovers. I just know I don't have the time for it, so I just try to get it as animated as it's gonna get with the limited visual medium of comics. And I say limited kind of sparingly, or kind of with a grain of salt, because you can do a lot with comics. But as far as that versus animation, there's obviously not a whole lot you can do with, unless you do want to just like spread everything out. But like I'm getting off topic there. But obviously there's certain limitations to comics versus like animation, and vice versa. Like sometimes in animation you can't hold on things for a long time because then you lose some of the kineticism. So so number one is as animated as it's gonna get. And I think and that's just like the mindset that I take. The example that I have of this is, I think I can't remember exactly what page it is, but it is from chapter 6. And so I think of, each panel having motion and flow the same way like actual animation and stuff would. So in this panel, you can see like Asadi is falling, but her falling starts, because this page is read from left to right, her falling starts when her foot trips, starts on the left side of the page, and she falls backwards and then rolls down onto the bottom right. And that is, carrying the viewer's, the reader's eye down to the bottom right, which is where they would naturally be reading if, this was like a panel of dialogue or something. Like they would still be reading left to right. So yeah, I think of it as moving, as animation. Number two is, it's all about the pacing. So, obviously when you're doing a comic, like people, and this, I will say, took me a little bit of time to like really think about, or to really consider, but people tend to only look at your panels for, a couple minutes at most, usually like a few seconds. But you can kind of use that, and I mean, obviously it sounds kind of sad because it's like you work so hard on these panels, but people only have like a certain amount of view time for them. But I think you can also use that to your advantage. So, if you have a certain amount of view time on panels, which you're not, gonna, unless you ask people, you're not gonna get the exact view time. But if you assume that like a panel of someone's head while they're talking gets a couple of seconds, or a panel of a environment or whatever gets, a minute or so, people are like really looking to see what they can see in the environment, like world building and stuff. I like to put a lot of world building things, in like in a room or something, character stuff. Then you can use that to your advantage. And the example I have for that is this page here from chapter 8. This page here from chapter 8, where it's, repeating, like repetition and then size are two things that I really like to think about when it comes to like pacing out my comic or pacing out my panels. So sizing wise, this panel here these panels, each of them are really narrow, so they give kind of a feeling of claustrophobia. And then repeating them over and over again, it's like, okay, it starts to kind of build up in awkwardness because you're just seeing the same panel over and over again, and it really like stretches out the time of how long these two are sitting here and engaging in this like awkward silence. And then there's very few changes in each panel, so I like to like do that as far as repetition wise. But then when it comes to like sizing and space, for the next example, I have a page, and those of you who read my comic know what this page is, but I have a page from the thumbnails of chapter 9. I don't know why I forgot that, it's such a big chapter. But thumbnails from pages of chapter 9, where it's, regular, the way that the flow is going, it's regular, panel sizes are regular, etc., etc. But then when it gets to a moment in time where somebody says something and time kind of freezes, is when I give that spacing, and I give that like repetition of like Asadi being in a square, and then Kohen is also in a square, to show that they're kind of like I want to say diametrically opposed, but it's not. It's too smart of a word for what I'm talking about right now. But they're like nothing. We don't need anything else in that frame. That frame doesn't have to be any bigger than what it like the square, the small like area where we can see their face. Give a little bit of space around, but like we just need to focus in on their face. And then we also, it's spaced out. So Another thing too with the animation part, there's a panel of Asadi when she's turned around, and then you see her like turn. So having that kind of mimicry with like frame by frame really helps too. But I guess that's more of a point for the last one. But yeah, so the spacing and repetition, hopefully that makes sense. Spacing and repetition, that helps a lot with pacing, and the size of your panels and stuff too helps a lot with pacing. Like if you have, a small moment in time, sometimes you only need a small little panel for that. Like just a very quick, like if somebody's coming into the room and they say, hey, but that's not really the focus. The focus is everyone else's response to them. Maybe you make that panel like really small, and then the panel of everybody responding is like super huge. But yeah, so chapter 9. I'm like also reading my notes right now. Sorry, this is a super unorthodox video. Oh, okay, all right. Oh, number 3. All right, number 3 is, I gotta say, like one of my favorites. Number 3 is managing your budget. So I already said before several times that leftovers is, I think of leftovers as more of an animation than I do as a comic. So a lot of people, if you watch anime or if you watch like any kind of media really with a critical eye, you can tell when a series is stretching its budget or when a series doesn't have budget or when they're like blowing their budget, something like that. And I think of recently, like very, very recently, I started thinking about leftovers like that. So an example, because we've already seen like pages that I've done before where it's just been kind of regular, but an example recently, where this mindset started to come in was chapter 16, where I had a fight. And it's like everything else, I've been super duper tight as far as like making sure I only get like 6 to 8 panels per page, which my page size tends to fluctuate. But what I usually do is make like an 8 by 14 inch page, and then have a small scene take place there, and then or like a small portion of a scene take place there, and then on the next page it's another portion of that scene, until like I have like 4 or 5 of those 8 by 14 inch pages, and I make them into one long page. So that might also be specifically like talking to people who make webtoons. That might also be an interesting way of like thumbnailing too, instead of doing like a whole episode in one thumbnail. Maybe like break it down into smaller sections so you can get more you can get some things that are like more when I say economy, I'm definitely thinking along that budget line now, but you can get more like economy pages where your panels are smaller and you have a lot more happening across fewer panels, and then you have your big budget pages where you can like bringing up again the fight scene from this most recent page or most recent chapter. There's just a whole long scene of slowly zooming in on Kiba and Kohen, who are my characters here, as they just slowly start to simmer around one another. And I really wanted to focus on that because for me, I usually tend to put my big budgets into character movements and body language and stuff like that. And then same here with this other page where it's like a 3-part shot of Kiba like lunging, and I could have, because she just like recoiled and like he knocked her away and then she recoiled and came back, and I could have just put the recoil come back into one panel, but I wanted to really build it up. So that's what I mean by like managing your budget. When you watch an anime fight or any kind of I'll just stick with anime for this one because that's where you can really like control, like where the money, you can really control like the amount of frames that you have in an animation. Something that's super duper fluid, usually had a lot more money behind it. Like for instance, a character fight or a character introduction, a first time introduction can be like super smooth, or focusing on a character expression, if it's super important, can be super smooth, can be done super smooth, and they usually have like budget behind them. But then normally you'll have, like a reverse shot of people talking, or my favorite technique. And I think this is actually part of, oh, you know what? That is part of number 4. Okay, I'm gonna stop it here. But yes, managing your budget. I tend to like, and again, these aren't tips for you guys to like 100% take and use. This is just how I think about my thumbnails. But yeah, so anime and not cutting corners, but anime and stuff takes me to my next point, which is number 4. We know what y'all look like. So all right, for me, when it comes to working on my comics, facial breaks are super important. And I was thinking about this when I was writing these notes up, and I was like, is it just because I'm socially awkward, or like I'm used to being socially awkward and like not making eye contact? So whenever, like even in school, I couldn't, like when the teacher was talking, I couldn't look at the teacher while they were talking, or else I wouldn't take in any information. I had to like look away or draw, and it's the ADD for me, probably. But like, I had to look somewhere else. So I was thinking like, oh, is it maybe that? But then it's also having grown up on anime and going, back a bit to the whole budget thing. A lot of the times, and once you start like actually recognizing and looking at it, it starts to become super apparent really quick. But a lot of the times, especially in older, like early 2000s anime, when a scene wasn't finished animating, because like animation schedules are brutal in Japan, let's just say it, but when a scene wasn't finished animating, or they didn't have all of, like, the scene didn't look great, it wasn't finished with post-production, whatever, etc., etc., whenever characters are talking, sometimes they would just cut to a relevant piece of scenery. Like just a tree. If you're talking about, oh, what do you want to do tonight, like, or train, or like they would just do that, and it's become a part of and I don't know which one came first, whether it was a cost cutting move first, or if that is just a part of like how anime, because anime does tend to, like, not everything, but obviously, but anime does tend to have more subtle imagery when it comes to emotions and stuff like that. That's a loaded thing, though. I'm not gonna go too into that. Maybe it's just the anime I've seen, but yeah. So I don't know which one came first, but that is something that I swear by. Where, and you can see like on this page here that I have up now, Asadi and Gidget are still talking, but like I'm not trying to look at them the entire time while they're talking. We have the relevant, we have Asadi being shocked, Asadi doing her cute like fist thing, whatever. Then you have Gidget, who's obviously turned around and addressing Asadi, and we see that Asadi, like, every panel there that needs to have characters in it has something important happening, and in each one something important is going on, or some new piece of information is being told to us. Like, oh, now we know that Asadi is standing. Oh, we know that Asadi is like is still there, and Gidget is addressing her, while she's over her shoulder, and she's not like down the street or something, or like across the room because they're in a cafeteria. But once we have all that information established, then I usually will switch to like an environment or a relevant object or something. And here it's Asadi. She's talking about her bowl and her seat, and asking Gidget if she can watch her stuff. Or even if it wasn't talking about that, it would still just be like, oh, we know that breakfast is going on right now, so I have my little bubbles, my little like character heads, and character heads will save you. Character heads have saved me a lot of times when it comes to like not having to redraw the character over and over again. And by character heads, I mean those little things in the corners that let you know like who's talking without us having to see them. But yeah, it not only does it help the scene feel less straightforward when it comes to dialogue, because a lot of Leftovers is dialogue, like a lot. It also provides like a bit of negative space, or like a visual break, in my opinion. So yeah, that is number 4. All right, number 5. I know I just said that number 3 is like my favorite, but actually, I think number 5 is really up there too. So number 5, I'm calling the camera game, and this is less to do with, or this, like, the example for this is less to do with my actual thumbnails, and more to do with like practice that I've done outside of my thumbnailing process. Also inside the thumbnailing process too. Like, a lot of working on webcomics is getting really good during the job. So yeah, so for the camera game, at some point in time, I unlocked, like, I don't know who I was blessed by to do this, but I unlocked mental camera control. And what I mean by that is that I am able to do like a full 360 on objects, on buildings. If I know what a building looks like, I can guess, like, fill it in, but I can do a full scene. I can do a full 360 on the scene. So I call that my mental camera, and a lot of that came from studying industrial design, because in industrial design they tend to take objects and they turn them around, because you have to, as an industrial designer, make sure the people who are producing the object know what the object looks like from all sides. So I was studying industrial design and how to draw stuff like that, and it gave me a completely different view on perspective away from the grid, where I can just turn things in space now. And then later on, I discovered my true love, Sketchfab, and I'm always pimping this website out. But if you need, models, or if you need if you have something like an object and you can't find a specific angle of it, go to sketchfab.com. Like, they will have your back, generally speaking. But going to Sketchfab, they have like user submitted 3D models that you can like move around all over the place, and that helps out so much, not just with reference, but with building a visual library of what certain shapes look like turned around in space. But yeah, so that was like finding the mental camera, or developing a mental camera, was one of the best like artistic skill sets that I think I've developed, because it really helps me spruce up. I can't reiterate this enough. Leftovers has a lot of talking in it, so it really helps me spruce up my talking scenes, because pulling up this example here of just like a separate game that I was doing with myself, each one of these camera angles can be a different panel of the same talk, right? Or people doing different people saying different things, but the same scene, like, they haven't moved at all from that scene, but having the different camera angles helps it feel more dynamic. And again, going back to the fact that I think about Leftovers as animation, is like, you don't really have a camera when you're working on a comic, when you're working on something still, so you kind of have to fudge it a bit. And it also really helps to learn what certain camera angles mean. So I would read up on film, maybe like books about film. There was one, it's called Framed Ink. I can't remember who it's by, but it's called Framed Ink. And that, I had that book. I didn't read all of it, but I did look into it and everything, and I like took in as much as I could visually. But look up stuff like that. Look up things about cinematography and everything like that. And really learn. And also just watch stuff. Like, just watch different bits of media and take down notes of how certain camera angles and stuff makes you feel, because a lot of this is really subconscious, and it's why another reason why I like had to sit and really think about where I was going to put this video, because a lot of it is, or so much of it is, subconscious. But yeah, like, you could have a camera angle, like, let's look at the bottom, right, the bottom two. So the over the head shot angle of Sammy, the Marshtomp, is it kind of gives it a bit of a claustrophobic feel, because it's like you're looking down on him and he's like, there's not very much space around him, versus the shot, the shoulder shot of Asadi, like right underneath that, where it kind of has more of a caring feel, because there is more space, and because you're not too far, but you're not too close on her too. And again, you know, maybe that's not technical or technically how that's supposed to be read, but a lot of the stuff is subconscious. A lot of it is just taking what you feel from watching other stuff and kind of fudging it in your own work when it comes to thumbnails, really. And I personally, I have I don't want to say it's not photographic memory, but I'm very impressionable with imagery. So, you know, whether I'm looking at a movie or looking at an AMV, like AMVs definitely, because AMVs have a lot of like different cuts and stuff in them, so it really helps out a lot. But whether I'm looking at an AMV or I'm looking at a movie or anime or whatever, the imagery sticks with me a lot, and you know, I end up bringing that back into my own work. And you know, I think all of us artists to a degree do actually do that too. So definitely make use of that when it comes to, is that a gnat? That is a gnat. When it comes to doing your thumbnails. So because we're going on like 40 minutes. All right. So yeah, number 6 is information in hierarchies. And this is pretty simple. Basically, figure out, one, what information you want to give your readers in this scene, and then 2, what information matters the most to you. So, you know, and those things can sometimes be opposed, or sometimes be, you know, opposites. Like, for instance, if you want to get across like a lot of different information, and it's kind of like an exposition dump, but you don't want to spend too much time on it. You might be tempted to put that all in one panel and just have like a bunch of text in a speech bubble. But then you might, in your heart, be like, oh man, I really want to focus on the body language, because for me, body language is super important with my characters. But it's like, oh, you might want to focus on the body language. Well, just like, or maybe it's just for me because I like the whole animation thing again. But for me personally, body language isn't just like one person saying a huge wall of text and then having the same body, or having the same like posture for the same thing. Like, and it could just also be because I'm dealing with a lot of anxious characters who fidget a lot, so they will change their positions to be more comfortable. And so it's important for me to reflect that in multiple panels. And that's why I mean by, you know, it might go against what information you want to give to the reader and how you want to give information to the reader. Because like if I have a panel of Asadi having to give exposition, yeah, I might want to get that over with as soon as possible because there is so much exposition. But also Asadi is a fidgeter, so now I need to take that one panel and make it into 2 or 3. And it, like, you just have to kind of weigh out which is more important for you. And at the end of the day, getting across the dialogue will always come second to how the dialogue is gotten across, if that makes sense. So, you know, whatever the person is saying, it's, for me, more important to see how the person is bodily wise, like reacting to what they're saying. And so that kind of lends itself to, again, talking about the budget thing, that lends itself to more panels sometimes to talk about or to show a person shifting their position or getting uncomfortable physically, as opposed to verbally. And then when I have those big budget scenes, I can really go all out on those and have, you know, somebody very, very slowly getting uncomfortable over like 5 spaced out ass panels. But yeah, those are my big budget scenes. All right, so next is, and I think this is all right. I thought this was the last one. It's not. Number 7 is panel pandemonium. This is a short one too. Basically, anything but a square and a rectangle. When this time last year, I was looking at how to like change my panels up for chapter 13 of my comic, and I just wanted to like have things be more dynamic, because I just felt like things were getting really stale. And so I looked at a bunch of comics in doujinshi and just in my personal collection, and I sat and I drew squares and I copied the page, like not the details of the page, like not the characters and stuff. I just copied the page and then copied the panel layout, And I noticed that basically the key to getting dynamic panels, besides your innate pacing and how you would innately want something to be portrayed, like is this supposed to feel uncomfortable, so maybe you put it on an angle, or maybe somebody else puts it in like a super narrow panel. That's what I mean by innately. It's different depending on different people, but a lot of like the secret to making more dynamic panels is to really just put an angle on it. Like, just don't have a regular square or a regular rectangle, or at least tilt that bitch, like you know. And my example here is for and that not only makes your pages look more dynamic, or makes your panels look more dynamic, it helps out if you don't feel confident about your character staging or your camera angles, and also can lend itself to helping set the tone for your comic. So for this page here, this was the first ever page that we saw of the Slateport arc, which means something to my readers, obviously. I don't know if you're new, then like come back later and you'll understand what that means. But like, this was the first ever page of my Slateport arc, and the Slateport arc in my notes is described as controlled chaos. So I wanted to portray that in the paneling, and it's like, okay, you know, this is a page where it definitely does have an order of reading, but because it's like kind of chaotic, it also can get really out of control really quick. The only two things that are really kind of in order are the two panels that are connected, which is and they're connected by the presence of Asadi, really. So the like larger panel on the left, and then the little rectangular panel at the bottom. But other than that, everything else is kind of tilted and chaotic, and there's a lot going on visually. So yeah, definitely vary up your panels like that. Alright, last one is kind of like it's number 8. And it's kind of like a weird one to leave off on, considering the context of this whole video. But number 8 is, do you even need thumbnails? So okay, let me explain myself. Just to set the scene real quick. What time is it? What time is it? But yes, it is September. Okay, this time last year, I was unemployed due to the big old 19, the Rona. I was unemployed because of the industry got to the hit and everything, and I was trying to make the most of my time working, or not working, but like being able to work on leftovers without having to like go to work. I was trying to make the most of my time on that. And I just, like, not only was I fighting anxiety from being unemployed and trying to pay bills, but also I was fighting anxiety from not having worked on leftovers for a really long time. Like, at that point, it was September, and the last time I posted leftovers was in February, which means, like, since those pages were ones that I already had done, the last time I worked on leftovers was January. So there was a lot of anxiety around hopping back into it, and this, maybe this will resonate with some of you guys, but for me personally, I've been working on leftovers for 6 years, and the anxiety never goes away. And I don't mean to say that as like to scare anybody off or anything, but it is always a process that I'm gonna have to look at and figure out new ways around. And that was, this was nothing different this time last year, where I'm trying to figure out a way to circumvent or trick myself into working on leftovers, specifically with the thumbnails, because that was where I was at. I had written the scripts back in April, and now I needed to thumbnail them. So I was hitting this wall of like, all right, the way my process works is I think about the chapter forever, then I write the script, and then I thumbnail like loosely, and then I take those thumbnails and I sketch over those, and I take those sketches and I line art and then color, post-processing, put all the pages together, combine the ones together that need to be combined, and then I post them, etc., etc. So I was hitting this wall where I was like, man, I'm really in here like thumbnailing, but then after I finish putting all of my brain juice into thumbnailing, then I just have to put more brain juice into tightening up those thumbnails with the sketch, and then even more brain juice into line arting. And it just got to the point where it was like, remember what I mentioned earlier with the impatience of taking what's in my head and putting it on the page and like getting it out on the page. And a lot of that impatience has to do with my anxiety, because for me, I was always on a ticking time bomb of when is my motivation going to run out? When am I not going to be able to work on my comic anymore? Because, this whole mentality of like, whenever I do get to work on it, this is just a phase, like it's going to go away. I have to finish it, like I have to finish it within this week or whatever, because you never know when something is going to happen, and it's going to make, especially being unemployed at the time, it was just a lot. Maybe that's another video, but later on. But yeah, so I had that, and I was like, all right, maybe the answer to that is to simplify my thumbnails, so that way it's less work put into my thumbnails, and then I can go and move into the sketching and line art and etc stages faster. So I started doing that, and this thing I have on screen now is just showing the process of me decreasing how much effort I was putting into my thumbnails. And it really, I was really proud of this at the time, but then it's still I still had this feeling of, man, this thumbnail process, or this thumbnail stage is, I don't know, it just felt like such a slog. And at the time, also because of the whole anxiety and being unemployed thing, I decided to take a social media detox. And this is where me talking about so I decided to take a social media detox, and I was like, okay, I can get a lot of work done if I don't have to worry about everyone else in this world whose lives are burning, because everybody, 2020 was hard. But yeah, so I took a social media detox, and my only caveat was that I would get on YouTube if I needed to watch like a tutorial or do some kind of creative thing, whether it's a tutorial or watching videos about like anime and how anime is made, etc, etc. I would only do that. No vlogs, no commentaries, no etc, whatever. Or not vlogs, but yeah, basically, if they weren't artistic related and they didn't have like an instructional vibe, as opposed to because I was watching a lot of commentaries and stuff back then about people like drama and shit like that. So I couldn't do anything like that. So one day I got on because I was like, okay, I need to figure out this thumbnailing process. I've simplified everything, but it still feels like a slog. So I thought, I was like, you know what, maybe what if I don't do thumbnails and I just sketch the page? Because my problem is that I had everything in my mind already. I had all the visuals in my mind already, but I was doing like 3 steps to get to that final vision, as opposed to really reevaluating if I really needed that many steps. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna just try to do the sketch first, and then like line art, and then etc, like straight from the script. And I was like, has anybody done that before? Like, is that illegal? So I got on YouTube and I looked up like something to the effect of webcomic help, and that's when I stumbled across CaezHel's videos. And I can't remember exactly what video it was, but all I know is that I binged all of their shit while I was struggling to like figure out my own thumbnail stuff, which brings this whole video like full circle, because they're obviously putting on a call because they're struggling with thumbnails, and I literally discovered them while I was struggling with thumbnails, in the midst, like in the heat of the moment, and I binged all of their videos, and I ended up like coming away with this idea, because they're at the time anyway, a lot of their videos were talking about getting their webcomic lucky to become a webcomic original, which involves having a consistent schedule and consistent quality and all this other stuff. And they were very, very adamant about being able to do it despite the odds, despite, you know, everything that life was throwing at them. And so for me personally, I'd always wanted Leftovers to be more consistent, but I just kind of it's a dream I just kind of give it up on at that point. But listening to their videos really made me realize that it's valid for me to have that dream of Leftovers being consistent, even if it's just for a little bit, even if it's just for a month. It's valid for me to want that. And so that kind of lit the fire under my ass again to really sit down and figure out this thumbnailing method, and how to make these thumbnails easier on me so I could do that and I could work on Leftovers without feeling like shit or feeling, you know, like some impeding doom was coming, because that's, you know, those of you who have anxiety know exactly what I'm talking about when I say like the impeding doom feeling, whether it's like impeding doom because you're not working on it or impeding doom because you're working on it too much, or it's just a lot. But yeah, so, you know, watching CaezHel's videos not only lit a fire under my ass to be like, all right, I'm gonna build this buffer, I'm gonna get fucking Leftovers on track, but it's also indirectly responsible for the fact that Leftovers was posting consistently up to August in 2021. So that's a big reason why I wanted to make this video too, responding to CaezHel, because their content really helped me out in just ways that you can't even imagine, or, you know, and ways that I haven't really talked about before either. So my final thing, just going back to the tip portion of this video, but my final thing is to just really reevaluate, you know, if you even need to do your thumbnailing stage, or if you even need to, like, maybe you do a variation of a thumbnailing stage. I think a lot of the times, you know, we tend to get locked in with these processes because everyone else is doing it, and not in a like, oh, everyone else is doing it like kind of way, if that makes sense, but not in that kind of way, but more just less like, oh, well, this is traditionally how it's done, but maybe you don't need to do that like traditional thing, and maybe you don't need that little step of like breadcrumb figuring out how your panels are laid out before you hop into it. Like for me personally, it comes out. Like when my main issue with having my thumbnails be so detailed, and having that, you know, take so much time, was that I already knew what I wanted to draw. So it just sucked that I had to sketch out what I wanted to draw and then sketch over that again and then line over that again. So I was like, you know what, why don't I just combine the first two stages and directly from my script do the full sketch of the page, so that way I don't have to worry about, you know, running out of steam in between thumbnailing and then blowing those thumbnails up and then sketching the page. Hopefully that made sense. But my last tip would be to really like look at your process and look at what you deem necessary, and look at how much time you have and what your goals are, and, you know, just all this other stuff, and figure out, you know, what kind of steps can you cut, or what kind of steps do you need to add either, because, you know, obviously this works in reverse too. It's not just about minimizing things, but sometimes maybe you need to maximize things. Like for me, and again, full circle, because I said I was going to mention this later, and here I am mentioning it later. With the exclusion of my thumbnail stage, now when I do my scripting stage, I like essentially thumbnail my scripts. So I'll do a whole synopsis of a chapter where it's just me talking to myself about what happens in the chapter, and then and that's just in paragraph form. And then I'll take that and I'll open up another document, and then I'll take the paragraph, because usually the paragraph is like me mentioning, oh yeah, so they say this, etc., and describing the scenes and stuff like that. But I'll take their paragraph and then I'll break it up into script format. So then that's when you have like Asai colon and then what she's saying, and then you have like location, like I'll break it up in the script format, and then either sometimes I'll print my pages off, or sometimes I'll just do it digitally. I bracket sections off of script, so that way I know how much I want to keep on a page. And that is what, you know, because like I'll give myself 50 pages in a chapter or something, and so then I have to again budget. I have to budget like where I bracket, how much I bracket off, etc., etc. And I'll probably like show a video of that or something, because I feel like it's difficult to like describe and have people understand. But yeah, so that is my video on thumbnailing. I don't know, like my recording right now is 55 minutes. I don't know how long this is actually going to be. I'm probably gonna have to edit some of this down, or maybe I'll just let it be like a podcast rambly sort of thing, because I know like I like listening to CaezHel's videos while I, you know, go out and grocery shop or work on my own stuff, so, and they're usually, you know, longer. So yeah, but I hope this helped anybody, or I hope at the very least you enjoyed like seeing somebody else's process. And I was thinking about doing more of these rambling videos. I actually attempted to do, I have like several recordings where I attempted to do, videos like this, with just talking about my process back when all of this stuff was happening last year, talking about my process and talking about things I learned. But even just back, you know, even just a few months ago, I was not very comfortable hearing my own voice in terms of like me talking about vulnerable things in front of you know, people, or on the not camera, but on the mic. And it just felt very self-indulgent. But I am, you know, taking it step by step, and right now I don't feel like I've been super self-indulgent. I'm actually very proud of myself. So yeah, I might do more of these down the line if I have something else I want to talk about, or if any of you have something that you want me to talk about. If you read my comic, or you just stumbled across my YouTube channel, and it could be about comics or YouTube or anything really related. But yeah, you can just let me know that. But for now, this is where I will leave this video, and I hope it helped, and I hope you have a good day, afternoon, night, whatever it is for you. This is Deja Doodle / Bakara signing out.